eyes may be able to see, but without a heart, you cannot feel.
What's up, everybody? This is George C.O.C. Samuels, and you are tuning in to episode 84 of the It Will Come Show. And today we're going to be talking about Dunbar's Number Part 2, Mongol Tumens, and optimal community sizes. So let's dive straight in. Okay, so here I am showing you actually a thumbnail or position in a video from a past episode. This was episode 81 where I spoke about Dunbar's Number. Now, if you don't recall, or if you're watching this for the first time, Dunbar comes from Robin Dunbar, I believe, and it's essentially about human beings, individuals, and how many relationships they can reasonably maintain at any one point. And the maximum is about 150. It's actually, I think, 148, but 150 is just a lot cleaner. And so, as you can see here, you usually look at numbers around 5, 15, 50, and 150. Okay. Now, what's interesting is since this video, I actually came across a follow-up article, and this was 3rd May, so 2 days ago. All right. So, this is a new research paper that came out from Dunbar and another woman, I believe, Weber. I think it's Emily Weber, if I can see it there. And yeah, so Robin Dunbar. And in this, they're talking about communities of practice. So communities of practice is generally a term used in more professional fields, right? So if you are a developer and you have a keen interest in JavaScript, a community of practice would be just a community of people around the practice of developing applications for JavaScript. Okay, that is an example. Another one would be if you had a community of interest around gardening. That's also another one that you could have community of interest in. And so community of practice, right? And so with that, the research that has come out is that they're trying to show, using evolutionary psychology and natural social communities, just sort of parallels between what was studied there with these type of communities and then also in the real world. So here, you can see here, right, frequency and community size. So I think this is frequency of engagement that they're looking at. And essentially, as the community size moves beyond around this 10 to 12 mark, I think it's 10 to 15, the engagement just drops off naturally. Now you might, I realize I'm not showing you the article. So here we go. In this graph, frequency on the left is the engagement, community size at the bottom is the community size, and you can see between 10 to 15, if we get very high engagement, but as you start moving beyond that, the engagement decreases naturally. So if you are looking to build a community, you need to pay attention to this, because this is how and why engagement can drop off. And so this is also why people talk about creating a sense of community. Creating a community and a sense of community, two different things. And so one of the things that I utilize a lot when looking to build communities is how you can just essentially chunk things down, create smaller groups, so that overall there's a sense of community. So there might be some overarching identity, but you create sort of structures that allow people to break out into these different units. And if you think about a family, right, family size is perfect because you may have about up to 5, or a large family might be like 10, 15 or something. And with that, if we look back at this here, right, your super family would be like your relatives around, right, and then the clan is 50, and then so on and so forth, tribe 150. And so don't fight evolutionary psychology, essentially, right? Look at these sort of numbers and see if you can create these groupings naturally. So you would have, your family, then your friends, and your extended family, so on and so forth. And so if you are in a business and you ever wonder why is the engagement dropping, it might be because of this. And if you want it to be self-sustainable, create these sort of groups and these group sizes so that they can extend on their own. So here, Dunbar's number is a cognitive limit. Often cited as 150 people, but breaks down into a series of numbers, which is often 5, 15, 50, 150, 500, 1500, relating to close friends, good friends, casual friends, acquaintances, and names you can put to faces, right? And the names you can put to faces is the important bit, because even in a startup or a business, as it grows, right, at the beginning they have a strong family feel, and you know everything that's happening, and you feel a real strong sense of camaraderie. But then after a certain number, you don't even know who's around anymore. It just gets too much to manage for yourself, because you not only have the relationships in the business, you might have other relationships outside, right? And so these become very interesting elements, and most people will sort of react to this unconsciously. But if you can be conscious about it, you can help shape it. If you are a community builder, right? Or shape it consciously so it's set up for success. So 5 main takeaways from this piece was business communities of practice mimic natural social communities. So there is no difference, right? Again, because it's just human beings. So I'm looking here, number 1. Number 2, communities of less than 40 tend to have a greater sense of camaraderie. So this is something that I've naturally have sought to build, right? Create strong sense of camaraderie with those people under 50 or 40. And then from there, you can magnify more of that, right? Or create more clusters of that. And that will help set a culture for a community as well. A lot of the times people just look at just increasing numbers, not spending any time on those sort of like first followers. And first followers is another really good term, which I have a friend who might be able to actually talk about that later on. But yeah, so just focus on those people, right? Especially on social media, you don't think about like, oh, I only have 100 followers or something. Think about those as 100 individuals in real life, and you might get a different sense of what's possible. Communities of more than around 40 people need formally recognized leadership. Yeah, so this is because when you do get to that size, leaders end up representing like an average, not necessarily everybody's right opinion, but a leader is picked because there's too many relationships. That's why we often look to leaders to be a representative of the average whole. Doesn't mean that they're always going to be reflective of the whole. It's going to be the average, right? So you can see here, communities of around 40 people or less can be more democratic, with management responsibilities spread amongst members. Larger communities tend to need formally recognized leadership. This number, which correlates with Dunbar's number, is echoed in both natural human groups and constructed business organizations, right? So you can see here. Apparent upper limit for democratic management of communities. I mean, this is fascinating, right? If you look at this and just sort of our own political systems, why it can often break down. When you get beyond, and populations are in the millions or even billions in some countries. When you get beyond just, what is that, 10, what's the average here? Around 40, yeah? And, yeah, this explains a lot. The larger the community is, the less often it is likely to meet. I'm sure you've experienced this. But it says here, 30% of the communities represented in the results meet weekly. The mean intervals are 12.6 days for groups of 5, 23.9 days for groups of 15, so on, so forth. And this is great, right? This is fascinating because they are literally proving Dunbar's theory. Smaller communities or subsets in larger communities can carry out more focused activities and tasks. I mean, this may seem like common sense, but it's amazing how often it is overlooked, right? Because there's always such... I've seen this in business play out all the time. There's always such a focus on just hitting big numbers, but not looking at sort of the clusters and the groups and creating them intentionally as you're growing those numbers, right? Because each of those units or groups can have specific focused activities, right? And they can focus on that while still be connected to the whole. It's that whole sort of yin-yang approach. So now, if we go here, Facebook mission and vision statement analysis. The reason why I brought Facebook up is because it's been very fascinating to see sort of their shift, right? Their original mission statement, and I'm looking here. Essentially, their original mission statement was actually just to connect the world, right? To make the world more connected. And then as they shifted, and it's funny here. So looking here, and I'm wondering if this is actually, this might be the old one that they have. I'm just looking at this. So it says here, vision statement to people to use Facebook to stay connected with friends and family, to discover what's going on in the world, and to share, express what matters to them. So actually, Facebook, mission, community. I'm going to bring this out because this actually ties in. Here we go. Yep, so here we go. Now this is actually an adapted one, but originally it was just to connect the world. But at this point in time, and I remember this very specifically because a couple years back when they made the switch in their mission, it was focused more around, okay, now we've connected the world. We've realized that people are more connected than ever, but still feeling disconnected. How do we get them back, to feeling like they're more closely connected? And this is where Facebook groups came in. So you might have noticed, if you are still using Facebook, there's been a lot more focus on the product development of Facebook groups themselves, right? Because Facebook realized that if you go to all these local communities in the United States, I think Mark Zuckerberg did a tour, of all these local neighborhood communities. He learned that, a lot of people just want to spend their time with a few people, not just be connected to everybody, right? That's not what actually brings people close together. Connection is not enough. You need to go deeper. And so this is what Facebook ended up doing, and this is very much in line with Dunbar's number as well. So remembering that Facebook is just a tool. Now I'm showing this because, if you've been watching my show, I'm a huge fan of wolves. And of course, plug here, we've got a productivity accelerator called the Pack, which actually leverages off of everything I'm sharing with you today. The wolf pack size here, you can see a pack may have between 2 to 30 wolves. The average is about 10. And it says here, may even reach 36. Now that's probably the 36 is probably like, the extended family, right? But about 10. What we've experienced in the Pack or the Productivity Accelerator is that between 8 to 12 is like the optimal amount for productive work, or for enough people to still feel connected, right? And still know each other and have that camaraderie, a sense of camaraderie. So this plays out in nature as well, not just humans. I put this here because I am also a huge history buff. So the Mongols, actually an interesting factoid, but the Mongols believe that they were descendants of the blue wolf, right? Hence why my fascination with the Mongols in relation to wolves. And the stories of Genghis Khan or Chinggis Khan was that he would study wolves out in the wild as he was growing up and being sort of kidnapped here and there. And that's how he got all of his military strategy, which was literally by studying nature and studying human beings in regards to that. And so what he did, along with some of the other Alexander the Great's, conquerors like Alexander the Great, the Mongols were well known for their small unit sizes and being able to be very agile, right? And so, they divided themselves into units of 10-man squads, 100-man squads. And of course, from a decimal standpoint, this is just much easier to manage, right? And so in relation to communities, the reason why I bring this up is because, when you think about armies, actually, they do a very good job of building a sense of camaraderie, right? Because they eat together, they sleep together, they fight together. And often these smaller units is what helps bring them closer together, right? Even though they're part of one single army, they would still have all of their units. So a lot can be learned from armies when it comes to community management as well. And it's not necessarily about having hierarchical management. It's just understanding why they are in those sizes. And so the Mongols also have another name for a unit of 10,000 called the Tumen. And that's why I put it into the title. It's a social and military unit of 10,000 households and soldiers, right? I think there was this, I remember from a book I was reading, I can't remember the name, I'll put it into the show notes, but essentially the quote was, no one, no 10,000. No 10,000, no one. It might have been the Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi, but essentially no one, no 10,000, no 10,000, no one. So it's all about from a single person, you can sort of glean or understand the masses, potentially. And then from the masses, you can also glean and understand the one, right? If you have enough knowledge, experience, and I guess perceptive skills. So yeah, that is the Mongols. And then the reason why I bring that about chunking and why I included the elephants bit in today's episode title is because this goes back to sort of general psychology, and if you are involved in sort of productivity and looking at goals and tasks and how do you break things down, there's a famous story about how do you eat an elephant, right? So most of the time, people psychologically, when they're looking at a goal, if it seems too big, they can't fathom, right? Like if you ask somebody how do you eat an elephant, this is sort of the imagery that gets conjured up. And it's the same thing with community sizes. When you get to a certain number, right, you have to chunk it down to make it more meaningful and digestible. So the same thing is here with this analogy, whereby if you have an elephant, you would, might be a bit graphic, but you chop it up, but you chunk it down, right? And so it's the same thing with goals too. If it seems too big, to make it more manageable, chunk it down into smaller pieces, because as human beings can only sort of deal with a certain size, and we are potentially limited by that. But if you understand it, it makes it easier to also manage multiple versions of the smaller. And then, of course, finally, plug as always, if it's relevant to the episode, the pack. We start actually today at 7:22 p.m. AEST, so that's Australian Eastern Standard Time. It is a productivity accelerator that's been running for, about 5 years now. And we apply all these principles that I just shared with you today. So if this is something that you're interested in, feel free to go to this URL, jointhepack.co, and just hop on, apply, and we'll answer any of your questions. And as always, remember, through patience and persistence, it will come.
The eyes may be able to see, but without a heart, you cannot feel.